Pokémon is one of the most popular and profitable franchises out there, and it holds a special place in the hearts of young and old alike. We're not saying our expectations were sky high going into a movie featuring CG Pokémon in the real world and a talking Pikachu voiced by Ryan Reynolds, but okay, who are we kidding? This movie was the lifelong dream we didn't even know we had. Let's take a look at all the hidden references and Easter eggs you might have missed. Detective Pikachu got off to a great start, featuring the iconic Gen 1 Pokémon Cubone. When Tim got hit by his bone club, it was like we were getting hit right in our brain's nostalgia center. Tim references the skull of a dead relative, but we all know in Pokémon lore that Cubones wear the skulls of their mothers. Not only is this kind of grim for a kids movie, but especially one which deals with a character who lost his own parent. But Detective Pikachu apparently doesn't shy away from the tough issues, and we respect the bold decision of including this grisly bit of Pokémon history. Speaking of those sweet original Pokémon references, Detective Pikachu wasn't shy about doling them out. Remember the good old days of playing Pokémon Red or Blue on your Game Boy? No, who are we kidding? We know you had both versions. One of the early frustrations took place while trying to traverse Route 11, which connects Vermilion City with Lavender Town. You know, the spooky place with the Pokemon Cemetery, because that's just so much fun for kids. But your path is blocked by a sleepy Snorlax who refuses to move if you don't have a Poké-Flute. Well, in Detective Pikachu, we also see a Snorlax casually sleeping in the middle of a road. No, that's fine, buddy, you just do you. Everyone knows that we didn't go to the theater to see the human actors of Detective Pikachu. We all went to see what the world would be like if our childhood fantasies of Pokemon being real were true. Of course, there were talented human actors, but come on, it's Pokemon in the real world.
He's adorable.
You're adorable. They can't understand me, kid.
So we don't blame you if you missed this particularly awesome cameo. While investigating his father's case, Tim and his pal Pikachu stumble upon an illegal Pokemon fighting ring. It turns out Pikachu once ran afoul of a man who seems to have a moral opposition to wearing a shirt. We don't blame you for being distracted by the Charizard vs. Pikachu battle, but if you blinked, you might have missed real-life DJ Diplo. He confirmed via Twitter that this cameo was the first time his kids have ever considered him cool. How many kids dreamed of having an awesome Pokemon like a Charizard who could fly and breathe fire? Yet the sad truth is that most people probably couldn't handle anything more dangerous than a Magikarp. We all know the pain of fishing out tons of these Pokemon who can't do anything but splash around weakly. So of course, they just couldn't resist throwing some shade at this Pokemon during the movie. A Magikarp's tank bursts open, splashing water everywhere, which is not any more helpful during the movie than it was in the game. Tim even remarks that Magikarp is pretty much useless before it turns into Gyarados. But at least we got to see this particular Magikarp evolve into Gyarados and actually do some damage. Everybody knows who Mewtwo is, and that they're the less cute and cuddly version of the ultra-powerful Mew. Although cuddling Mew probably isn't a very good idea either. The plot of the original animated Pokemon movie centers around Mewtwo, who wasn't the biggest fan of humans to say the least. It's kinda hard to blame them for that, to be honest, and that was something this version of Mewtwo also had to deal with. When Tim and Lucy find the secret test facility, they're able to view footage of scientists preparing for Mewtwo's arrival. Dr. Laurent says the last time Mewtwo was seen was 20 years ago in the Kanto region. That's where the original games were located and around the same year that they were released. Everyone knows that the character of Pikachu was voiced by actor Ryan Reynolds, but even though he was one of the stars of the movie, another character had not one but two different voice actors. Mewtwo was voiced by Rina Hoshino and Kotaro Watanabe. Having a male and a female voice actor speaking together really added to the strange artificial eeriness of the character. It's clear Mewtwo grapples with their disdain for humans and the knowledge that humans are capable of empathy and kindness. This dual voice acting really exemplifies this struggle and adds an element of depth to the character. We aren't gonna say Detective Pikachu was the height of suspense, but it did have one pretty surprising twist. The big reveal of the movie wasn't that Tim's father was really alive, because that was disclosed pretty early on. It was that he was not only alive, but in the body of Detective Pikachu, his own business partner. But maybe it shouldn't have been such a huge surprise since it was hinted at earlier in the movie. While Tim and Pikachu interrogate a Mr. Mime, Pikachu guesses that he's trying to mime "I push people away and then blame them for leaving." Not only does Pikachu essentially do this exact thing to Tim later in the movie, but after the big reveal, it's clear that's exactly what happened to this relationship between father and son. If there's one thing the Pokemon franchise isn't short on, it's lore. There is so much history in the Pokemon universe, and obviously the target audience of Detective Pikachu just eats that stuff up. There were a few moments casual fans might not have noticed, like when Pikachu exclaims, "Mother of Arceus!" Arceus is an ancient Pokemon some refer to as the original one, and it's generally considered to be a godlike Pokemon. Apparently that part of the lore is very much alive and well in the Detective Pikachu universe as well. This joke was a bit more on the nose, especially if you were a fan of the Pokemon anime from way back when. Everyone knows that Jigglypuff is a painfully adorable Pokemon who loves to sing. In the video game, this talent can be used to put other Pokemon to sleep, but in the show it affects anyone nearby. Much to Jigglypuff's dismay, nobody can seem to listen to its song without falling asleep, which is why we see a person asleep next to it while it sings in Detective Pikachu. The ramifications of having a singing Pokemon which causes you to fall asleep aren't explored in the movie, but it seems like this would be a bad pick for a Pokemon partner, especially if it draws on you once you fall asleep like in the show. Speaking of the grim realities of Pokemon in the real world, did you spot the unique car accessory Lucy has? When she and Tim take her car, you can see a little toy Spoink affixed to her dashboard. These Pokemon look like a cross between a pig and a spring, but of course its creators had to throw in a little bit of extra weirdness. Those springs are connected to the Spoink's hearts. This means they have to keep bouncing even when they're asleep, or their hearts will stop. Yeah, that doesn't seem like a bit of a design flaw or anything. Everyone knows that in the Pokemon universe, the often ineffectual bad guys are known as Team Rocket. Yet in Detective Pikachu, we were shocked to see the big bad boss wasn't Giovanni, but rather a man named Howard Clifford. In fact, there's no mention of legendary Pokemon bad guys anywhere in the movie. But although this movie went in a different direction, it's clear Team Rocket was simply gone, but not forgotten. The name of the substance used to incite Pokemon is referred to as R, which we see on the vials and on graffiti around Ryme City. It certainly looks like the iconic Team Rocket are, or at least that's what we're telling ourselves. If you're a huge Pokemon fan or just a fan of Super Smash Bros. Melee, you might have recognized a particular symbol which pops up numerous times during Detective Pikachu. It's a pretty obscure reference, but here at ScreenRant, that's just the kind that we like the most. Particularly observant fans may have noticed the symbols of Unown pop up on signs all around Ryme City. It's even shown on Tim's shirt in the beginning of the movie. Maybe that's why people aren't convinced you really don't like Pokemon, Tim. Unowns are incredibly rare, which explains why we didn't see any actual ones floating around in the movie. We hate to even say it, but Pokemon do not exist in the real world. We know, we struggle to cope with this too. Many of us have done so by watching the anime, reading the manga, playing the video games, and of course, playing the trading card game. It's not hard to remember the excitement of tearing open a new pack of Pokemon cards, and apparently, that's a joy a young Tim once knew. When Pikachu is inspecting his room, he finds a binder of Pokemon cards. It's kind of interesting that in a world where Pokemon actually exist, people still play the card game. Later in the movie, Pikachu even sings the theme song to the cartoon as he sadly walks down the road. Are Pokemon allowed to drink alcohol? That's one of the many questions about the logistics of Detective Pikachu that we were left with after watching the movie, but let's not get too far off course here. Tim and Pikachu head to a place in order to talk about Harry and what case he was working on before his disappearance. Later on, we see Tim, Pikachu, and Lucy all meet up at the same place. Ludicolo is apparently helping tend the bar, but we wanted to point out the bar's unique logo. This place is called the Noctowl, and the logo looks like one of those Pokemon. It's not very surprising that the vast majority of the little Easter eggs and references in Detective Pikachu are about Pokemon or the Pokemon universe. But there was one particular throwback reference to something non-Pokemon that we loved. When Tim enters his father's apartment, he initially mistakes the television for people being in the room. He dismisses the program as a detective movie, but it's actually a movie called Angels with Filthy Souls. If you've never heard of it, that's because it's a movie filmed specifically for Home Alone. Tim happens upon the same scene we saw Kevin watching in that classic holiday movie. We didn't head into Detective Pikachu expecting a Home Alone reference, but we have to admit that we loved it.
Keep the change, you filthy animal.
Earlier, we admitted to being surprised that the iconic Pokemon-based criminal organization Team Rocket wasn't featured in Detective Pikachu. Another surprise was that the movie featured someone who wasn't Ash Ketchum himself. We're used to seeing people journey to become the very best, the best there ever was, but instead we got Tim, who gave up that dream a long time ago. But Pokemon fans noticed Lucy looks pretty familiar. She's very reminiscent of Misty, and even has a troublesome Psyduck like Misty did. Only in Detective Pikachu, Lucy drives a real car instead of a bicycle, which is probably a good call. Is Lucy supposed to be a tribute to Misty, or is this just a coincidence? Maybe the Psyduck-Pikachu dynamic was just too good not to use in this movie. Maybe you're a fan of the cute, cuddly Pokemon, but you don't necessarily have the years and years of Pokemon experience that some fans do. Well, as much experience as you can have with fictional creatures at least. But don't worry, because there are still plenty of jokes you can appreciate even if you don't have the encyclopedic knowledge of Pokemon or the Home Alone franchise. Early in the movie, we learned that Tim's father moved to Ryme City and later invited his son to join him. Instead, Tim chose to stay with his grandmother because he felt abandoned by his father. What was the name of the town Tim stayed in? According to his train ticket, he was reluctant to move away from Leavin' Town. There are a lot of interesting aspects of life in the Detective Pikachu universe. Pokemon battles have always seemed kind of morally dubious under the best of circumstances. In the show, several storylines feature Ash trying desperately to save the life of a Pokemon, like when his Pikachu was attacked by Spearows, or that time a heartless monster abandoned Charmander in the rain which threatened to extinguish his tail and his life. But purposefully forcing Pokemon to fight for your amusement is apparently totally fine. We even see a boxing promo poster in Detective Pikachu which shows two fighting-type Pokemon, Machamp and Primeape. We wonder if people still watch human boxing and martial arts in this universe. Since the people and Pokemon of Ryme City live and work so closely together, it makes sense establishments would cater to both human and Pokemon. But we also spotted a sign advertising that the diner offers something called berry juice. No, it's not the latest Gwyneth Paltrow juice cleanse. It's a reference to an old Gen 2 potion. One sip of berry juice and your Pokemon will be back in fighting shape. Just like in the anime, some people just aren't charmed by the idiosyncrasies associated with Psyducks. If these Pokemon get overwhelmed, they get headaches and can even explode when things get too intense. Hey, some people just don't do well under pressure. We understand you, Psyduck. But in Detective Pikachu, it's determined that Psyduck exploding would definitely be bad. So when he starts to freak out, Pikachu does his best to comfort him. Before resorting to foot rubs, he tries to calm him with the phrase "serenity now." This is a line from the hit sitcom Seinfeld. When George Costanza's father was struggling with high blood pressure, he was advised to use the phrase when he felt himself getting angry. We know, it's shocking that didn't help calm him down.
Serenity now! Serenity now!
Early in the movie, it's established that in Ryme City, people and Pokemon live together in perfect harmony. Well, almost. Everyone seems to have a Pokemon partner, and it's so common that everyone he meets is shocked to learn that Tim doesn't have one. But there also seems to be plenty of rogue Pokemon floating around without a human companion, which makes us question the setup going on here. Apparently, it is possible for Pokemon to go missing, though, because we spotted numerous missing posters featuring images of various Pokemon. During the scene with the underground Pokemon fight, there were some Pokemon who seemed to be the same ones someone reported missing. It's a minor detail, but it makes these illegal fights all the more unsettling. Somehow they took making sentient beings fight each other for entertainment and made it even worse. We wonder how many other fictional franchises exist in the Detective Pikachu universe. Clearly, they have Home Alone and Seinfeld at least, and we saw a great reference to another great movie. Howard Clifford's evil plan is to fill a bunch of parade balloons with the dreaded R substance and then cause them to burst, spraying the noxious purple gas all over the people and Pokemon nearby. It's a plan which may have seemed pretty familiar, and that's because we've seen it in a movie before. In Tim Burton's Batman movie, the Joker uses the exact same tactic at one point. Did Clifford seriously copy the Joker when he was putting together his evil plan? Maybe he never finished watching Batman and didn't realize the Joker doesn't live happily ever after. Sure, we don't get to live in a world where Pokemon exist, but hey, at least we do have parades. Yeah, that didn't comfort us either. Sorry. At least our parades don't involve horrifically toxic substances coming out of the balloons and turning us into inhuman creatures. And our parades have celebrated the Pokemon franchise before, notably the famous Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. Pikachu has his own balloon, and what do you know, it looks just like the balloon we saw in Detective Pikachu. Why bother reinventing the wheel or reimagining a giant inflatable Pokemon? Honestly, we're in favor of replacing the other Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade balloons with more Pokemon-themed ones. He may be a crazy villain with the creepiest ditto in all of existence, but Howard Clifford does have a really cool office. When Tim enters his office, Clifford is in the process of evolving an Eevee into a Flareon by using a Firestone. It's pretty distracting, but behind Clifford's desk are 3 large fossils that look to be those of legendary Pokémon. It appears to be Dialga, Palkia, and Arceus. Earlier we mentioned that Arceus supposedly created the whole Pokémon universe, so one can only imagine how rare and precious that fossil is. Really seems like it should be in a museum instead of a rich guy's office. As much as we love them, of course we all have our favorite Pokémon who stand out from the rest. And then we have Mr. Mime, who's apparently about as likable as a real-life Mime. Apparently one Mr. Mime was an informant for Tim's father, and now Tim and Pikachu have to learn what he knows. It all seems like fun and games, but during the interrogation scene it looks as though Mr. Mime is actually using his powers instead of just pretending. He can use moves like Barrier, Reflect, and Light Screen to block attacks, so when we see Tim bump into something invisible, it's likely an example of Mr. Mime's powers. How many of these fun Easter eggs did you manage to spot the first time you watched Detective Pikachu? Or did you manage to find one we missed? Share your discoveries with us in the comments section below, and then click on the subscribe button to get access to the latest and greatest videos from us here at ScreenRant. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next time.